the thinking of the more liberally inclined among us, and that's using the word in a very inappropriate way, but for the sake of conversation, we'll call them progressives, that's what they prefer anyway. In the thinking of the progressively inclined among us, they think it's really kind of a neat thing for the government to collect taxes and then give it back to the people. That's what they're saying. That's their concept. That otherwise government just simply takes and consumes. But at least with welfare programs, government is taking from the people and then giving back to the people, right? That's what they're thinking. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of problems with that, not the least of which is the fact, as I've already mentioned, if you take something from somebody and then give it to somebody else, that's called stealing. And it's just a minor problem there, and actually a major problem there. And as I pointed out, it corrupts the whole thing. It corrupts the issue of benevolence because you're really not giving anything. You're taking from someone else to give it. That's not benevolence. It's not benevolent for me to rob you to bless somebody else. I'm not giving anything. Benevolence can only occur when I'm giving up something myself to someone else. And the liberals are real good at giving somebody money that they take from somebody else. But you check their tax records and typically they're not very good at giving themselves. So one problem with this system is that it corrupts benevolence because it really isn't giving. And it corrupts the whole issue of private property and the right to own one's labor and the product of one's labor. It corrupts all of that because I have one party, the party of one part, taking from the party of the second part to give to the party of the third part. And it is always very interesting how much of the money taken from the party of the second part lands in the pockets of the party of the first part on its way to the party of the third part. Did I confuse you sufficiently with the parties? But it is interesting how that happens. In other words, the person that's doing this business of taking from him to give to them is really doing it to elevate themselves. That's what Judas was all about. He didn't care about the poor. He cared about himself. And that's typically what's going on. So it corrupts the whole principle of free market. It corrupts the principle of property and of ownership of one's labor, of the product of one's labor. It breaks all that down. And so it corrupts benevolence, and it corrupts the persons who are receiving it. I did a 1-minute show this week on how to catch a pig. You've probably seen the email circulating. Many of you probably have. And it's something I've seen before, and I thought was pretty clever. It was apropos to something I wanted to do in my radio show this coming weekend, and fits right now. How to catch a pig. You know how to catch a herd of pigs? Well, you put some pig food out in the field somewhere, and then you get out of the way. And the pigs go snorting around. They find the food. Amen. They gather to the food, and they go and eat it all up. Oink, oink. Amen. And you do that for a while until they get real comfortable, until they expect to find the food there. So they come in a herd and they come to the same place because they've been taught to expect the food. And you put up one line of fence. You don't put the whole fence up, just put one line of fencing. That's all. So the pigs come up and typically they'll look at the fence, they'll snort around and check the fence out a little bit and then go on and oink up their food. And start eating. And they get accustomed to having the fence, that one piece of fence. They get accustomed to it. They think nothing more about it. After a while, you put up a second section of fence. And once again, they kind of come, they look it over, they wonder about it a little bit, they kind of think of what's going on. They might smell a little human presence there a little bit, and they sniff, and finally that fades. And then right back at it, and they're eating, they're oinking up the food again, grunting it up, digging it up, rooting it up, enjoying the food, free food. Well, by now, they've become real accustomed to finding the food there. They're no longer in the habit of going out and foraging for themselves. They're accustomed to just coming and finding food provided for them. And so they come back, and now there's 3 legs of fence up and only one way to get in. So they kind of go around the fence a little bit, find the opening, look it over, check it out. But they don't spend too much time checking it out. I mean, they've seen these fences before. They go on in, they enjoy the food. After a while, each time, it's maybe a month or two in between, and it takes some time to condition the pigs. And so they set up finally the fourth section. They've got a completely enclosed area with one gate, and the gate doors open. The pigs come, and they go snorting around, trying to find. They finally find the opening, and maybe one of the smarter of the pigs kind of stops there and kind of thinks, I wonder what this is about. And all the other dumb pigs go on in. So he sits there, he says, well, why should they have all the fun? He goes in too. So all the pigs are in there now, and they're linking up the food and enjoying it. And what do? You walk over from behind a bush somewhere, you slam the gate closed, and you lock it. And bacon, baby! You've got bacon, pork loin, and baby back ribs. All right. For a while now. You get yourself a whole herd that way. That's how you catch a pig. The problem is it doesn't only work on pigs. Or I should say it works on pigs of another kind. And people who are foolish enough to think that something the government gives them for free, it's never free, it can't be free, it's impossible, it costs something, and it's ultimately going to cost you the most. And that's the problem. See, the person who pays the greatest price for all of this ultimately is the poor. They're the ones who become caged animals kept by the keepers and used to support their power base. And they're only useful insofar as they help certain persons maintain power. Beyond that, they become something else called, you ready for this? Useless eaters. Have you ever heard that expression? Useless eaters. See, right now they're useful eaters. They're useful because they can vote. So you want to collect as many of the pigs as you can because each of the pigs has a vote. But when you get past that and you got all the power you want out of them, then pretty soon you start viewing them as useless eaters. And so the same government that feeds you becomes the government who then owns you. I'm telling you, the people who are the most to be damaged in a welfare state are the very poor they used to create it. They lose their dignity, they lose a great measure of their humanity, they lose their own sense of worth and value. It's a degrading system.